One. Hello, everyone. In this episode of Director Discussions, I'm fortunate enough, my dear friend Ben Brewer makes his return to the channel. Where do I even begin? Ben is the director behind Arcadian, starring Nicolas Cage, which is available to watch now in theaters, select theaters all around the world. And on top of that, Ben is the director behind films such as The Trust, A Folded Ocean, and the writer behind films such as Reptile. Ben, my brother, it's
Yeah,
so good to talk to you. How are you doing today, man?
dude, what a great, you're so good at this.
Oh, stop, man.
Your
Making me blush.
your acumen is unbelievable. Yeah, I'm great. I'm so glad that we're chatting again.
This is like I think this is one of the first directors I've had back on the channel twice. But for anyone who doesn't know, in real life, me and Ben are best friends. As in, I'm always messaging him, asking him about things, and he's always replying to me. So the fact I get to chat with someone like Ben, he's given me nothing but time, no matter how busy he is. I really own the world. So the fact I get to chat
Oh
with you
yeah.
while this film is out here, man, it's amazing. It's amazing. So thank you so much for taking the time, brother, man. Really,
Yeah, dude, I hope we chat many more times.
dude, for the rest
I'm
of our life.
honored to be brought back on the channel.
I'm looking forward to it, man. I mean, so many different things to talk about. I mean, what's this period like for you now that Arcadian's out in the world? Does it belong to you anymore? Because I was talking to Wes Ball, who just directed Planet of the Apes, and I was like, what's this like for you? And his approach, and I know so many other filmmakers kind of when a film goes out there, they wash their hands of it and it doesn't belong to them anymore. And I guess that's kind of a coping mechanism in a way. Well, what's this period like for you? What's your connection with the film now that's out there in the world?
Yeah, it's funny. Well, I would think that I guess from watching other filmmakers I know who have been in much longer like films. So this movie was we shot it and that's out in the world like within the year.
Yeah.
So it's like real down and dirty indie like, it's just but a film like I'm sure those Planet of the Apes films I think they probably take a few years to actually complete. And so I know from watching other filmmaker friends that like sometimes a movie can get to the point where by the time anyone's seeing it, you're so sick to death of it, and then you have to start promoting it and doing all that. So, um, yeah, I'm not sick of this movie because it was very fast
Yeah.
turnaround. I it also wasn't a painful edit. Like we kind of you never know with a movie. Like you try your best to make sure you're shooting everything that the story needs, but then you can get in the edit and realize that oh, that scene was not gonna it's not gonna make it, or
Yeah.
we need to shoot additional stuff, or just a ton of just work in the edit to get to happen in this film. Like I think because the story is ultimately pretty simple. Yeah, we kind of everything we shot is in there, and I think our pickups we shot like two very minor insert shots. But yeah, so to me it was as painless as it can get with like
Wow.
making a movie. I would say.
So can you watch the film? Is that okay for you? I mean, what do you like even for your other films? Are you good? Some filmmakers can watch their films. Other filmmakers are like, I'll watch it 400 times in the edit, and once at the premiere, never again. What are you like?
Yeah, I'm a little bit that. I'm definitely like I'm not afraid of watching it, but it was a movie that I even when we were watching down for like sound mixes and stuff like that, I always liked it. I was like, I
Yeah.
like this movie. Like, I don't mind hanging out with it.
Yeah.
I credit that to everybody who made it enjoyable for me, which is
Yeah.
like, not the actors, but then also the production design, the costumes, the cinematography. It's just kind of like, I like the vibe of it. So yeah, there's nothing in there that makes me wince, which is nice. But yeah, in general, what it is though is that the premiere of it. So this we premiered at South by, and that it's hard for that not to become like kind of the peak experience of a movie because it's an incredibly warm crowd.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's being presented in a really high level of you know presentation. I think for me, like I'm aware of that, and so yeah, I've only seen it that one time, like with people in a movie theater, because
Wow.
there's a sold out crowd in Austin, Texas, and it's just like you're like, well, I'm not gonna. This is gonna, and also by the way, it's pure anxiety and adrenaline because
Man.
you're hearing like you're so attuned to everyone's reactions, and you get that thing in a theater where you kind of feel like there's like a collective, like almost like a psychic thing where it's like you
Yeah,
can
yeah,
tell
yeah.
when people are checking in or or checked out. So yeah, that experience I think is like both gratifying and traumatizing, and it makes me be like, yeah, I don't need to like sit with people again and watch it.
Dude, that's amazing, man. And I can imagine you in the theater, but I suppose like do you feel it's unnatural watching the film with an audience in a way because you're not thinking, that's not necessarily an aspect of filmmaking. You can embrace that aspect of going out there and sitting down with an audience and watching it. But when you're on set, I'm sure you're not thinking about you're ever going to actually have to sit down with an audience and watch that. Would you say that's an unnatural experience, or what's that process like?
I actually think it's, you know, especially at a film festival where the understanding with the audience is that the people who made it are there.
Yeah.
And as
Yeah.
you know, you've been to film festivals, you've watched movies. There's that thing that happens when the movie starts playing and the opening credits, like a company credit will show up and you'll just hear people applauding because the company is there. Or you'll see someone's name and you'll applaud. And so I think that sets the tone for
Yeah.
like this kind of this kind of, it makes it clear that people made this, and in that way it's almost kind of like you've you know you've hung up a curtain in a barn and you're putting on a play. Like it's very like this is made by people for people.
Yeah.
and
It's intimate.
and so I like that sense because even though these films take a lot of time, they cost a lot of money, like ultimately they are, people just making their best effort. And I think when you remove that by just sticking it in movie theaters without literally having present the people who made it, then you can get a lot more kind of critical of what you're seeing. But I always love watching movies at film festivals because especially if I know the filmmakers or I just know who's turned out, like it's hard not to sort of give the film your most generous and also
Yeah.
most like, isn't it great we get to do this kind of
Yeah.
response. So um yeah, I think that's the best way to watch movies is to be just like with the people who made it and
Yeah.
humanize it.
You should just sneak into every screening from now. And I'm sure there's nothing you'd love more than watching the film over and over and over and over and over again. But dude, that's amazing. And so Arcadian, talk to me about kind of you as a filmmaker and where it sits with you. You made the trust. You've had such an interesting career, music videos, the trust, and then exploring VFX, obviously, and then coming to Arcadian, a folded ocean. How does Arcadian sit, do you think, in the overall kind of trajectory of your career? Is this the film with the most you in it? Is this, is this your creature feature? What is Arcadian to you at this point in your career?
Dude, I don't know. I don't I don't believe in careers, I think is ultimately it. It's like
Yeah,
you sort of I it might sound a little overly Zen or something or
oh yeah,
Buddhist, but I'm
yeah,
just like
yeah,
I don't really believe in, because I think you grow up and you're aware of these directors that you love,
yeah,
and you think about how they did it. But the truth is that anybody that you grew up loving, like the industry has completely evolved since they
yeah,
were, you know, making their films. And yeah, for me, you know, I've I've just pursued opportunities when they've arose, and I just figured I love this stuff. I can't It's what I want to do. I like telling stories. I like all the tools that you can use to tell a story. And so I try not to balk at things, or get too egotistical about what it is that because I figure like if I make it, it will be me.
yeah,
You
yeah.
did I have um, a dream of making a monster film? Like, I don't know. Like, I'm just drawn to stories and people and the idea of that if you can do something different with it, why not try? So I was just grateful for the opportunity. In general, um, somebody asking you to direct something is like a very rare and kind of amazing thing to happen. And so, yeah, it'd been 8 years since I made my first movie, and
Wow. Yeah.
I just thought it'd be a great chance to also like explore some like interesting visual effects stuff with this company I had started, Pretend, after
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
I'd worked on Everything Everywhere all at once, and Yeah, I just don't. I try to be very present. I don't think at all about the resume. I'm just like,
Amazing, man.
because it
Yeah,
makes no my career makes no sense to anyone.
I think it was like Soderbergh who said, you can write out how you think your career is going to go, and then it'll be like that, and it'll change every single day. So it's actually fascinating to hear you talk about that. What was it about Arcadian that appealed to you as a filmmaker? Was it the VFX getting you a chance to explore that? Was it the familial aspects? Was it the monsters? What was it about Arcadian that I think maybe as a filmmaker, as an artist, that appealed to you?
I, the script, it was about, these brothers, this coming of age story about brothers. And since I had, before this, I'd almost solely worked with my brother as like co-directors. And we were supposed to actually do this together. And then he couldn't because he got a job as a designer at Mondo,
Wow.
company. And so, yeah, I just thought, because the thing is, like, I love a good apocalypse movie or a post-apocalyptic movie, and I think that my favorite one ever is Road Warrior, the Mad Max, second Mad Max,
Yeah, man.
and that film is perfect to me, and I think that what makes it perfect is that it centers itself so much on theme, even though it's this wild, action movie. It's like it's very thematically driven, and so when I read this script and saw that you could actually hang interesting coming of age themes in a post-apocalyptic landscape,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, well, that's cool. Like I can make something that is pursuing something that I idolized about this other movie. I can do it here. So, I'm not too concerned with anything other than knowing that I need those monsters to represent children learning about death, and I need the stuff that happens in it to be about what it's like to be 16 and realize that for the first time that your decisions have real world consequences and that you have
Yeah.
to take on responsibility. So I like that the film had this opportunity to just externalize all this like coming of age stuff into like literally physical manifestations of these kind of internal things. And then yeah, the visual effects element stuff, like I really wanted Pretend, our company, to take on another film and take on something that had things that we hadn't done before, like a fully CG creature and all that sort
Yeah.
of thing.
Dude, amazing. And so funny hearing you talk about the Road Warrior inspiration. Have you seen Furiosa?
Yeah, I love Furiosa. I thought
What
it was
did you
great.
think? I thought it was amazing, man. I love George Miller because like you watch it and like he's like 74 or something. He's like you wouldn't expect a 74-year-old to be directing. And it's really interesting seeing how his style has changed from even Fury Road, especially in the action sequences. But what did you think of Furiosa?
I mean, I thought it was excellent because that's a world he's thought so much about, and he manages to, when he makes a film in the franchise, he's doing it because he has some very different thing to explore about it. And
Yeah,
so I guess like you could kind of compare it to Thunderdome because it's kind of dealing with like the warlord thing. But like I don't know, the idea of like seeing like this history of these competing warlords, I just loved it. Like I thought Chris Hemsworth was like excellent.
yeah,
It really absolutely scratched the itch that I will say I think like probably my least favorite Mad Max film is Fury Road. I think that's the one that
really?
m- made the meant the least to me. I think it's an incredible achievement. It's like kind of weird to put that last, but in terms of I think the filmmaking of Mad Max 1, Road Warrior, and even Thunderdome, like Furiosa feels like it's kind of back in reifying the stuff he did there.
Wow.
And I just think it's also one of those movies where, as a director, you sit there and there's so much stuff in it that I'm like, I just watched something that is so hard to do.
Yeah,
Because like I don't know, like certain stunts are really like showy and incredible, but then some things happen on screen, and
yeah,
you're like, wow, like that is like I think everyone's gonna take that moment for granted, but that was like one of the hardest things I've seen in a movie in a long time. So there's a little bit of that thing of as a director kind of appreciating
yeah,
not just what he does as a storyteller, but also just like sort of on a craft, like practical standpoint, what he's
yeah.
doing. So yeah, I thought it was excellent.
Yeah, not to go back to Soderbergh too much, but I saw an interview where he talked about George Miller's blocking. And like
Mm,
it wasn't just that he was impressed by it, it was that he didn't know how he did it. Like
yeah.
he was actually in awe of him. And like like for someone like Steven Soderbergh, who's obviously done so much in this industry, to see look at someone like George Miller who blocks this scene, he just didn't have a clue on how it was done and what that process was like. So that's amazing. But yeah, everyone should go check out Furiosa and then Arcadian as well. That'd be a nice little double bill there. I think those are two good films to go into. But I'd also love to ask you, when you're going into something like Arcadian, obviously you've directed a feature before. Was there any pressure that came that? Did you feel nervous going into Arcadian? What was that like for you to go into this and be given an opportunity to work on a film like this? Were you nervous? Did you feel pressured, or what was that like for you as a person?
Yeah, it's funny. I wasn't nervous, and I think it's because I had done a film before.
Yeah,
And part of what it was that, and I really, when we were making it, I was like, oh, like this is a movie that you really have to have done one to do this, simply
really?
because not for any like pretentious artistic reason, but just like practical,
Yeah,
like get done stuff. Because I could picture myself, if it was the first thing I was ever asked to do, I don't think I would have the same kind of. I think I'd put so much um, pressure on it to
yeah,
be like exactly, Whereas this was like a very low budget indie film with a lot of expensive sounding stuff in it. And so I made a lot of choices from the jump
yeah,
about aesthetic, just how to do it, you know. And so I think, I mean, to be honest, like we shot in 20 days, and like I think I was so focused on is this possible that I wasn't thinking about like anything else. I was just like, if we get this done, it'll be like a miracle. So,
yeah,
I was like, and I think I felt happy and confident because I seemed like I was a good custodian for just like the practical, how do you get this done in the time we have kind of stuff. Um, and then, yeah, in terms of working with actors and things like that, that's kind of, you know, a acting is something I don't do, but it's ultimately my true passion is so something I don't know how to do, but it's what I'm passionate about is the craft of acting. And so, when it came to actually like working on the material with the actors, that's just it's like anything. If you wake up every day doing something, you're not gonna be scared to do it
yeah.
on the day. So, I spend so much time focusing on that part of directing in my free time of just, doing everything, going to acting workshops, whatever, that when it came time to actually get and like work out the scenes. Yeah. And the other big piece of advice is like you don't have to be like I think as a director, you're like you think of yourself as the captain of the ship, and so the captain should have all the answers, and they should be like kind of the person everyone looks to, and that is true. But when it comes to your actors, especially, like your job is to listen to them, and your
Yeah,
job is to be humble and throw out ideas in the hopes that they have a better one.
yeah,
Like there's a whole aspect of it that's very like if you know to table your ego and be like, no, like my job is to draw out the best in these very talented people. It's not to be the most talented person. That also like completely shifts how you put pressure on yourself.
wow. And did you learn that from your previous, and was that learned on a specific film like The Trust, or was that just through your I know you don't believe in careers, but just through your previous films? When did you learn that lesson?
I learned that lesson actually writing when I was one of the writers doing Reptile, the
Oh, yeah.
Benicio del Toro film, because that process was sitting in a room with Benicio, who's like one of the most humble and polite genius people you can work with. And you're sitting there and you've done your best job to create material that checks what you think is going to make for a good scene or movie or whatever. And then someone like Benicio in his very kind way shows you how much better it could be. And he was like a perfect compass for what was weak and what needed to be better. And so um that was kind of the moment where it clicked for me that uh working with amazing actors like him or Nick, that's a chance for you to go back to school. That's a chance for you to
Yeah,
learn.
that's a
Um, and so yeah, I was like that process taught me a ton. It was very gratifying, humbling, and yeah, I just took that and I was like, yeah, that's gonna be how I work from now on. It's like it's like these are kind of mentors, who I just have to be an antenna for their help.
Dude, I feel, funny enough, I feel the exact same way about even talking to you. I remember when I was first getting my camera, I would ask you questions and you were so kind. You were even sending me footage you shot on your Sony and like, it was just that it was learning, man. Like, and I love learning. That's, I think, a big way why I have this channel is so I can learn every day. So, man, it's funny that you feel the same way because I would never even think that you'd feel the same way towards other people, but that's
No,
amazing.
it's something I noticed about you right away that occurred to me. I was like, oh, this means that Daniel will be a great director, is that you have humility. Like you are not an egotistical young man. You ask questions. I mean, that's like the value of that can't be understated. And, I probably locked into that knowledge when I was 30. And so you're way ahead of the game.
Oh, dude, I hope so. I hope so, man. Well, it looks someone like you saying that means everything, man. Yeah, but like the kindness you've shown me, man. Like a lot of big filmmakers wouldn't have even taken the time to reply. So the fact I had someone like you who I could talk to, like it meant the world, man. So I won't kiss your arse too much, but I'd love to ask you. James Cameron talked about this, and it's funny hearing you talk now. You kind of had me think about this as well. The importance of planning. You know, he said that the way he keeps his budgets down, and he makes the biggest films you can make on any scale possible. He makes
Wait,
big.
did you talk to James Cameron?
No, I definitely did
Oh
not. I
man,
read this in an interview somewhere. Not yet. I have a few more. I have a few years left before I'll get him, but give it time, man. Give it time. But he talked in this interview, not with me, about how he keeps his budgets low by planning.
yeah.
By rigorously planning, by storyboarding, and he said it's actually easier because when you show up and if you know what you're doing, it's easier for everyone. And especially when you're working with something like VFX, can you afford to show up on the day and not have a plan and find it on set? Can you even afford that when you're, and maybe it's different for you because I know you talked in interviews about how some filmmakers are a lot more rigorous if they know they're going to be working with VFX because they don't know, oh, if we shoot it like this, maybe VFX, they won't be able to do it. But because you have that knowledge, can you actually show up without a plan on a set?
N- Not totally. I think that in some cases, yeah, like it depends on what you're trying to execute. So I'd say that when it came to this film, when it, sequences with the monster, sequences with driving, with anything that kind of had a lot of moving parts, I would storyboard it or I would pre-visit in Blender, um, like block it that way. And that was it's a time-saving mechanism. It's also a way to help figure out the budget of the actual sequence. Like you were
Yeah.
saying, like, truly like keeping costs down in part, it's that if you don't plan out a sequence, if you don't plan out what you're going to do, departments still have to bid it out. Like a visual effects company has to bid it out. They have to say, oh, it's going to cost this. And so if you don't have those things really nailed down, they are going to submit a huge cost.
Yeah.
And ultimately, once that cost gets approved, that money is spent. Like you can't, it's not one of these things where it's like, oh, we actually kind of saved money. Here's money back into the budget. Like pretty much there are people whose job it is to make sure that every dollar is accounted for. So famous stories about things going over budget. There are other stories that are less famous about the terror of something under budget. Like I've
Yeah.
heard stories about line producers on a movie desperately trying to basically make up for
Wow.
massive coming in under budget because
Wow.
that's just as bad. So so again, so when you're planning a shoot, we had very limited resources, so we had to figure out how to do it as inexpensively as possible. And so
Yeah.
that's where the utility that comes in. But when it comes to a bigger film, like what James Cameron would make, But it kind of makes sense for the trajectory of his career. They start Terminator, right? And then like as they've grown.
Piranha 2, I think it was, and
Oh,
then
right. Yeah. Sorry, Piranha 2. Me. And then Terminator, but it would make sense that he'd go from this kind of Roger Corman, every nickel counts, to bigger movies where every nickel still does count, but it's just about like your goal is to get the number to be as true as it can be because you don't want cost to balloon because you were lazy about something, you
Yeah,
know. And in fact, like the best thing you can do as a director is just like understand a little bit about what everyone on your movie does so that you could speak their language. Like I think I probably said this before, but like you don't, you know, you don't want to disrespect people or be rude to people, but you also don't want to be so like deferential and obsequious, like, oh yeah, you know, you tell me, like you kind of
yeah,
like nobody wants that. Nobody, they want you to speak the language that they speak so that you can actually like help them.
yeah,
So no matter what it is, like so for instance, like uh building sets, right? So on this movie, the desire at first was to do everything on location.
yeah,
And given what happens in like the third act of the film, I just knew that there was so much that was happening in this like space they lived in the upstairs floor of their house. I was like, that just it has to be a set. Like it's
yeah,
just
yeah, yeah,
there's too much of a lift. And so that was a place where I to the producers I said, whatever has to shift around, like this has to be a set. Um, but then in terms of how we use that set, you know, visual effects can come in and help. Like for instance, like there's a bunch of shots in that movie that are my favorite because they're just invisible visual effects. They're not the monster or anything like that. But like, so we knew that we had this gag. I'm rambling a bit, but we had this gag
no,
where
go ahead, man, that's why you're here.
Jaden pulls a trap and it catches the monster, right?
Yeah,
And so on the day we bought this cage, but of course, you know, if you wanted to practically build some, you know, special trap that would actually work and unfold and catch a thing, I mean, that's like we didn't have the resources or the manpower to do that. And so instead, what happened was, you know, we had a set with flyaway ceiling. So they pulled the
yeah,
ceiling, a
yeah,
crane arm lifted up the cage into the above the ceiling,
yeah,
and then we just dropped it fully built when it landed on the ground because I knew that later I could in CGI create the shot of this thing on the ceiling unfolding and going down. So if you watch the film, it cuts really briefly to like this wooden cage thing that's like unfolding and falling. And I made that on the laptop I'm talking to you on right now. Like it's
ah,
every inch of that is just CG. So yeah, like you're you're trying to be speaking everyone's language so that you're
yeah.
not like I said asking for unreasonable things or asking for stuff that's too reasonable and you should be like, you know, you should be pushing it further. So yeah, there's a lot of that goes into it. I don't know, that was a ramble. I apologize.
I loved every single second of it, dude. You're so knowledgeable about film, so every time I get to chat with you, I love picking your brain. As a filmmaker, do you personally want to be the least experienced person on set in a way? Do you want to be surrounded by people? Would that be a good scenario for you personally, Ben Brewer, to be the least experienced person on set, or would you prefer not to be?
That's a good question. I think that inevitably you are.
Yeah,
Um inevitably you are the least experienced person if you're the director. Unless your career had you, which, you know, James Cameron, he was a production designer, like, you know, some people's their careers put them on set a lot. You know, and I would say that part of it comes into like I do this thing now at the beginning of a shoot when we're sitting around with the department heads before you shoot in the big round table, you kind of like go over everything one last time. And I take a moment to say, look, you're all incredibly talented. Like we barely deserve to be working with you guys on this. We're so grateful. Um, you know, don't ever catch me getting mad about something because inevitably something's going to be frustrating to me and
Yeah.
to all of us. But let's just try instead, just benefit of the doubt, know how much I respect you. And so instead of doing anything else, just take a moment and just ask me what it is that I'm afraid of in that moment. And let's just talk about in terms of my fears or anyone's fear, because that's kind of what makes people angry and frustrated. Because the last thing I want is to not honor how well you do what you do, So, but
Yeah.
I might be afraid of a real thing. So let's just talk about what I'm afraid of. So yeah, I for sure always want to be surrounded by the very experienced people. But part of the beauty of filmmaking is there's no one way to do it, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, man. Yeah.
And so if you want to do something a certain way, uh you got to fight for it and say like, no, we're going to do it this way. And I know I'm looking at the most experienced people on earth and you've never done it this way. And all I can say is like, this is how we're going to do it this time.
Wow.
And there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that in filmmaking. So yeah.
That's amazing. And do you feel like Arcadian came to you at the perfect point in your career? Because it's fascinating hearing you talk about these things that I've never given much thought to, but now that you talk, I'm like, oh, of course, obviously it would be like that, or you would have to deal with that. And I mean, you look at kind of the progression of your films. Do you feel like if Arcadian came 5 years earlier, do you think you would have been able to do it, or do you think this literally came to you at the perfect point in your career?
Yeah, for sure. Perfect point. Just that, again, like I kind of can only think in terms of like the practical nature of it because 5 years ago I was not nearly as well versed in like 3D.
Yeah,
So everything everywhere, doing the visual effects on that, and then just kind of like developing more skills. It definitely made me more competent and confident in 3D. So like, like I said, there's a ton of not a ton, but there's quite a bit of material in the film that I knew I could do in my computer later, and so I just did. Or for that matter, our incredible team, like the team who did the monster and stuff like that. Like I just knew that stuff a little better than I would have 5 years ago. So that was a benefit. But also you know, like I said, like movies are rare. It's
yeah,
hard to get them made. Um, when one shows up, uh you have to look at it and be like, this is a year of your life no matter what. Like
yeah,
best case scenario is a year of your life, so you're going to live with this for a year. But then the next thing, if you're saying I think I want to do this, you just have to say, uh, I'm going to make the shit out of this movie. Like
yeah,
that's my job. I'm going to make the shit out of this um and see what happens. So yeah, I really, I'm happy that it has only been good
yeah.
for me. Uh, because yeah, it was definitely I agreed to it and then was kind of straight into it. So
And yeah, and dude, even outside of practicality, I mean, we talked about your humility and your temperament and how you talk to people, and being able to say to producers, look, I respect you, but if I do get frustrated, let's talk about it. Do you feel like that's also who you are now as an artist, and who you were you that same person when you made The Trust or Folded Ocean or wrote Reptile? Was that Ben Brewer? Do you feel like that was the perfect time for you as well as your temperament? Am I making sense here with my question?
yeah, I mean, I guess when my brother and I did the trust, what it was, we had come off of doing 5 years of music videos. And I think by comparison, a feature film felt actually like way easier than what we were having to do in music videos. And it was it was being brought into the fold of like, you're here to capture actors doing great stuff. That's all that matters. No one's paying because no one's paying a ticket prices because they love a great dolly shot. Like they're paying because they like great
Yeah,
actors. And so, yeah, I think that I've never really had the luxury of being on something that was so high profile and well funded that I could accidentally become a jerk over it. I think just everything has been very grounded by the realities of the resources. And yeah, and it's also it's hard to affect any kind of an ego when you know ultimately you're, going to be doing the visual effects yourself, or you're going to be,
Yeah.
or like just any of that stuff. Like the more you take on personally and the less you're just trying to be just try to direct people, tell people what to do, the better. It's like, you're in it with them. You're in it with everyone.
Yeah, and I'm sure for you, like it's funny. I never really thought about how VFX affected you as a director, because I guess in my head I always separated those two things. But it's funny actually hearing the crossover and how it affects you as a director and how you're always kind of thinking about that. You know, would you ever direct a film and let someone else do the VFX? I mean, obviously with Pretend, I'm sure there's other people working on it, but what would you ever? Is that something that interests you, working with other people on VFX, or just because you've done it for so long, you know what you want and you know how to get it?
Yeah, I would say the what it is that, so, you know, definitely we we work with quite a lot of different visual effects artists. They're all usually far more experienced and more legitimate and trained than we are on stuff. And so what happens is, or the advantage is that, first of all, you get to learn because it's a space that you have knowledge in. So if you're talking to somebody who knows more than you, you're just getting better yourself. Whereas if you're a director and you're kind of like ignorant to it all, you're just gonna always be frustrated because it's a world you know nothing, you continue to know nothing about. So what's helpful though is that, like, we just did a project now where, like, a big thing that we did at Pretend would just be like, we can bring shots into After Effects that are work in progress from other artists, and we can demonstrate things in a very rudimentary fashion
Yeah,
that are the notes that we want done.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And so, like, because language can only take you so far, in explaining things, and also what you really have as a visual effects artist is an eye. You have an eye for things, and like what light should be doing, and like what the environment should be doing, all this stuff. And so being able to, even in a primitive way, put that on its feet, whether it's like a draw over in my iPad, or or just like roughing it in After Effects, like something that takes me 15 minutes saves a expensive visual effects process a lot of time, a lot of money.
yeah,
So yeah, and it can be fun too, because sometimes you propose something because we're so untrained and we're just self-taught. You propose things that are kind of crazy and broken, and sometimes the artists you work with really embrace it because they're like, "Oh, whatever, this is fun."
yeah,
Or sometimes they push back and they don't want to do it, but like at least you're getting people who are incredibly skilled and gifted to think outside the box in a way that they maybe haven't before. But you're there with them. You're like, we're in this together. I'm not just like throwing crazy at you.
yeah, yeah.
I'm saying this is how I want to do it. Can we do it that way? And I'll take the responsibility. Sorry, I didn't think that answered it, but I tried.
Oh, yeah, I love it, man. It's just so fascinating hearing you talk about these aspects that I don't get to talk to with a lot of other directors, because it's not very common for a director to also dabble in VFX. And I think it's just such an amazing way to make films. And hearing your process and how it actually differs for you, it's not something I ever really thought about, but I think that's amazing, man. But just taking you aside a bit, I'd also love to ask you, I saw in an interview you talked about how, I think it was during COVID, or you actually got into comic books. Well,
Yeah.
and so for anyone who doesn't know, I started out interviewing comic book creators. I'm a comic book aficionado, not to sound too
Uh,
cool, not to sound too cool, everyone. All right, ladies, relax. But I used to have comic books on my wall here, my comic book posters, but I switched it up with some film. But talk to me about that, your interest in comic books. Where did that come from?
it really was to the idea that those are the comics I got interested in. It was like, indie comics. So like
Yeah,
Dan Clowes, the Hernandez brothers who did Love and Rockets.
yeah,
just some of these uh, people who just every line is theirs. And, the great early Marvel stuff, like the, Stan Lee, Steve Ditko, Spider-Man, all that stuff, it was a small team.
Yeah.
And those early comics influenced these creators in the 80s, like Klaus or the Hernandez brothers. And they decided, because they didn't have any, not that it was a resource dependent, but they were like, they do everything. So they're writing it, they're drawing it, they're inking it, they're lettering it, they're doing it's everything. R. Crumb is like one of my all-time heroes. Um, and I think that Crumb especially points out this dream that comics has achieved that film hasn't, which is that anyone can do it. That comics often are made by people who grew up with very little, but they had a pencil and a piece of paper and they could create a world. They could create everything. So that's what I respond to with comics. I love that.
It's so funny because I guess they're obviously two different mediums, but I think they share a lot of similarities. But comic books is so much more immediate. You can have a comic done in a week, 24 pages. You could have a script done. I know some writers who can do a 24-page script in a week, send it off, and that's like a comic script written in a week. Very hard to write a feature film script and have it completely finished in a week. And
Yeah.
it's funny that immediacy. I guess I think a lot about it, and I think about the control it must be for different creatives. Comic books, I guess it's a lot more easier to be in control of every single aspect. Film, I think a lot of directors, their goal is to be in control of every single aspect, but you're never going to. Bits are always going to fly or go in different directions. So it's funny always seeing that connection with comic books. Would you ever be interested in writing a comic?
Yeah, I mean, in my free time, I just draw like comics for no one. I'll just like draw for myself like a page of a fake comic book. Try to keep my drawing skills up a bit. But yeah, I would love to work it. I think that uh, you know, it's a it's basically what any art needs to thrive is basically people who have no money doing it. Um,
Yeah,
and I think that a big reason why Hollywood films aren't, knocking out of the park all the time is that to be a filmmaker, it's very expensive and
yeah,
it's very hard to try to do it if you don't have financial support from someone else. And so, like often once you dig into directors, you find that there's a trust fund, there's a thing that supports them. And
yeah,
I
yeah,
say this just from observing over 10 years or whatever it's been. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. You don't choose that. But there's basically this entire wealth of voices that just the cost of entry is enormous. And to try to hold a job and also be a filmmaker is very difficult. I mean, that's what me and my brother did when we started out in music videos. And it was crazy because we would like we just ate cereal for every meal and like, drove a crappy car and like, and we take any job we could. Like it was hard. And
yeah,
and I don't like that the barrier is so high because I think that comics are full of incredible stories because they're told by real people, not to, I mean,
yeah,
everyone's a real person, but they're told by people who really have interesting experiences, different experiences. So I think that there is a lack of diversity of experience in
yeah,
films right now because
yeah,
it's to be available to direct one, you have to be financially supported somehow. Whereas like comic book artists, you can work any job and it's just about going home and sitting at the table and expressing yourself. That's why, like, just quick, the I love the first Spider-Man comics are like the best
yeah. The
because
early
it's
stuff.
like you could just tell it's written by guys who have no money. They're just like dudes in Brooklyn, like telling a story. Because the early Spider-Man stories is like one of my favorites. Is I think it's issue 2 of Spider-Man. Is
Yeah.
Spider-Man trying to figure out how to make money off of being Spider-Man? Because he's got no money. And it starts with him trying to cash a check that he got for like wrestling or whatever, or like a public appearance. And they won't cash it because he doesn't have ID. So because it's written out to Spider-Man. So the bank won't cash his check. And then he goes and breaks into the Fantastic Four's lair, or not lair, but they're like headquarters.
Yeah.
This whole amazing uh fight with the Fantastic Four, and they're like, finally they just ask him, they're like, Spider-Man, what are you doing in here? Like after they're done fighting, he's like, oh, I'm here, I want a job. You guys got to hire me. And then Fantastic Four's like, well, we're a non-profit organization. We don't pay anything. And then he's like, okay, screw this, and he leaves. I mean, like, that's what I love. And I
Yeah.
love picturing that Spider-Man was born of these working class dudes walking over the probably Williamsburg Bridge and
Yeah.
just looking up at this concrete jungle and being like, wouldn't it be amazing to ride on top of the subway car, to swing through these buildings that are just these that represent our subjugation under this like
Yeah.
oppressive system. And so I think that's a beautiful artistic creation that films desperately need to get that
I
energy.
agree. I
Yeah.
agree 100%, man. That's something I've noticed. I've never talked about this before in an interview, but it's a worry, man. I'm 16. I don't know. I wasn't around for that age of cinema where it was $5, $2 to go see a film. I do worry that it's become almost elitist now. You want to go see a film, it's 20 quid, $20 just to even get two tickets or a ticket and a drink or something. And you look at Italian neorealism and the French New Wave, and these were movements of cinema that were born of the working class. This was working class cinema. These were working
Yeah.
class people making working class films. And so the kind of progression of cinema to me has always kind of, to the point where it is now, I do have those words as well. I've gotten to do a few red carpets and press things, and I've always felt out of place. I'm from the north side, which here in Dublin, and I'm from Coolock, so I'd go up there, and then you'd get all these posh people drinking wine in trench coats who have no interest in cinema, but who are there for the red carpet. And it makes me think a lot about that divide that there is now. I'm not sure if you've seen the film Babylon, but Brad Pitt kind of has this monologue while he's wasted, and he talks about how cinema was the working man's medium, how you could go with a nickel. His folks weren't rich, but they would go pay for a nickel and they'd see it at the vaudeville houses and stuff like that. And that to me was like, that affected me. I was like, wow, because that's what cinema should be. And I've never made that comparison between comics and film. So it's amazing to hear you talk about. Sorry, I'm rambling on, but I just wanted to say,
No,
man.
no, I think it's super important. And I tell you what, I couldn't afford to sit in a movie theater from 2020 till 30. I don't know. Like I really like I could count the number of movies I could go see in a movie theater during that time, like on two hands. Like it was in the early days. I mean, I started making some money when I was doing some commercials and music videos, but it was like you get paid for a gig and then it'd be 3 months before you get another one. So you couldn't really like it was hard to budget yourself. But yeah, I can't to this day, even though it's easier for me to afford the movie ticket,
Yeah,
um, it really this it hits me as a luxury because
yeah, it does.
it was nothing and maybe also I revisit the anxiety I would have because people would always be like, oh, let's go to the movies, and I'd be like, I'm broke, like I can't go to a movie, so but I think that the thing is sitting under our noses with this, which is that um don't make movies the way they're saying movies need to be made. Like I've kind of already broken through the looking glass where I'm kind of focused on projects that are just going to kind of exist in this system, and I'm just going to have to like do with what I can. But if I was 16 right now,
Yeah,
I would do exactly what you're doing. I'd get a great camera, which you can get for like very inexpensively compared to what it used to cost. I'd work on it. I'd just work on the craft. I'd just watch YouTube videos on how-tos, and I'd develop what I like, what I don't like. And then I would go hunting high and low for a great actor, because all you need is it's like Godard. You just need a girl and a gun. Like that's what a
yeah,
movie is. It's a great actor and a camera and maybe a buddy to hold the microphone. But my friend Pete O's, who's a fantastic filmmaker, that's the only way he makes movies. He takes his own money and he's the whole crew. It's just him and a camera. He puts the lav mics on his actors. The actors write the script with him. And he just makes a film. And that's what your generation should absolutely do.
yeah,
Because if something like that doesn't happen, it's I think we're teetering on the edge of there being no diversity of story in films
Yeah,
because it's dominated by the 1%, basically.
I
It's
know.
dominated by incredibly wealthy people. So, and nothing against them. They've told them, they've said all, they've told a ton of stories now, and I think they're running out, and we gotta have some, yeah, some other people need a shot.
Yeah, dude, Ben, I'll make you proud, man. You have my word. I'll invite you to all my premieres, man. All my premieres. But dude,
Dude, I can't wait.
you hit the nail on the head there, dude. There isn't a better note we could wrap it up on. My last question for you. I mean, your career. What you want from your career? Because I look you now, and I know for a fact, man, you're gonna go on to do even bigger things than you've done now, man. I think you're an unbelievable talent, and I'm so glad the world are finally seeing that with things like Arcadian. But do you want to direct studio films? Do you want to make more indie films? What do you want for your career going forward?
I want to tell people that I knew you when you were interviewing directors, or you became Ireland's greatest directorial exports since Neil
Oh,
Jordan. I don't know why I said Neil. Yeah,
I hope so, man. I hope so. High praise.
wait, Neil Jordan's Irish, right? Did I get
Yeah,
that
Neil
right?
Jordan and Jim Sheridan are like the two
They're the
godfathers
two, yeah.
of
And
Irish film.
Loach, Ken Loach.
Ken Loach is English.
Oh, he is?
Yeah, he's English,
What
man.
the hell? I'm
Is
an
he?
idiot. Oh yeah, of course he's English. But I think because everyone was in Ireland was there. They were all big Ken Loach
Oh,
fans.
they love, yeah, because his films, he makes very kind of working class films as well. So
Yeah.
he's very big. He's very beloved. That's a good shout, though.
Sorry. Yeah, okay. My stuff. I mean, I have two other movies that are both kind of like cooking along in a great way. I'm rewriting one of them right now for producers that I'm excited to be working with. Um, I think that I hope I just always stand for there being no rules. Like even if I make a film, like this next film that I'm working on is like completely different than like, and it has no visual effects or anything like that. But hopefully I would just pivot back and just do anything that sounds good to me. Like I just want to disrupt everything um and yeah, I honestly like my nightmare is the red carpet with the people who
Yeah.
treat movies as status. Like I don't want anything to do with that. I like I remember watching a documentary on Lil Wayne once, and
I
it's
never thought this would be like a brought up in my interview, but I can't wait to hear it. Go ahead, man.
so Lil Wayne, who is famous for the way he records, it's all off the top. He's freestyle. It's all off the top of his head. He's like a genius. So like his records, he would just literally just hits record and starts talking. So he was in Paris in this documentary, and he got nominated for like 10 Grammys. And his entourage was all hanging out in the like incredible suite in Paris that they were, penthouse they were in. And they're like, "Where's Wayne? Like, the Grammys just came in. We got 10 Grammys." They're like, I think he's in the tour bus." And so you watch this guy go down to the alley next to the hotel, and he goes up on the tour bus, and Lil Wayne's in the back alone with a microphone set up, and he's recording because it's all when he wasn't on stage, he was recording. And the guy walks up, he taps him, and Wayne like takes the headphones off. He's like, "Wayne, we got 10 Grammys." And he's like, "Oh, sick, awesome." Well, he probably didn't say sick, but he said something Lil Wayne like. He's like, "Yeah, that's great." And then there's kind of a beat, and then Lil Wayne just kind of puts the headphones back on, goes back to recording, and that's it. And the guy walks up the bus. And as I've gotten older and I've never related to something more than that. Like literally, like I just want to work. I don't like nothing else is remotely as gratifying as working.
Yeah,
Like showing the movie once, getting, to talk to Daniel. These are the things I love.
yeah,
Short of that, it's work. Work is where everything exists and is great and is makes you feel alive and like you're contributing something. So yeah, I just want to be Lil Wayne on the bus. That's all I want to.
dude,
That's my career.
you are the most Lil Wayne person I've ever interviewed. I mean that from my heart, man. I mean that from my heart, dude. That's from deep. That's the nicest thing I've ever said. Ben, what a pleasure it's been chatting with you. I've gotten to chat with a lot of filmmakers, but truly, man, you're one of the closest friends, and I'm so grateful I've gotten to discover you through this channel and the time you've given me over our friendship. It means more than words to say. I owe you so much. Before we finish up, are you on Instagram? Anywhere people can go follow you? Twitter, Facebook, anything you'd like to promote?
Um, well, yeah, I'm on Instagram. Brewer Films is my Instagram, I
Class.
think. I
You
say
got,
that. I think
yeah.
that's what it is. Um, I'm on Instagram all the time. That's not to say I'm not looking at Instagram. I look at it all the time. I just can't quite say that that's truly. I think that's my name on there. Um, yeah, I don't got shit to promote. Go see the movie, I guess. I don't care. Like,
Okay, I'll
go
speak for I'll speak
there.
for Ben. Ben, shush for a minute. Go see Arcadian. It's in select theaters right now. You can go Google it, see where your local cinema is showing it there. Something like that, Ben, I think would have been nice, but don't worry about it. I'll sort it out. We'll get this film it's to be a box office success, dude. Ben, thank you so much, dude, from the bottom of my heart for taking the time to chat with me, man. You've always been such a legend, and it really means the world you chat to me again, especially when you have this film out in the world. You're a legend. Thank you so much, brother.
Dude, thank you, man. Thank you.
Dude, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.